Hi folks, Dave, the Honest Audiophile. This is the Hidizs MD4, and these are my Honest Audiophile impressions. I want to thank Hidizs for providing the MD4 for review. Do greatly appreciate it. Hidizs, you rock. Alright, so the Hidizs MD4, this is available on Hidizs.net for $189. It is currently on sale for $169. If you use the discount code Hidizs MD4, you'll get 10% off for a grand total of $152.10 currently. The Hidizs MD4, this is a 4 custom designed BA IEM, and it has 2 balanced armatures for the bass, 1 balanced armature for the mids, and 1 balanced armature for the treble. It has a 3-way crossover, has 4 tuning filters, which you can get them set in balanced, warm, bass, or treble modes. Has 8 ohms of impedance, 102 decibels of sensitivity, and a frequency response of 20 Hz to 40 kHz. It does include a quad-core cable that has 2 cores of silver and 2 cores of OFC copper. Take the lid off, you'll get your IEMs here on the inside, and then you get a tray of tips. You get bass, vocals, and balanced. And then you also get a little cleaning tool. You also get a nice carrying case, a little bit of a pocket, big deep tray. Tips. The vocals are a little bit wide bore, bass are a little narrow bore, and balanced are kind of in between the two. We'll talk about that here in a minute. All right, the IEMs themselves, you're going to connect with 2-pin connectors. You have a very nice cable, well controlled. Very, very nice cable. I really do enjoy it. It terminates into 3.5. Ear hooks are just about right on their aggression. All metal housing. Nice little faceplate. You get a slight wing on the shell. Decent angle. And an okay length on the nozzle. On the back side here of the shell, you do have your tuning filters. You have number 1 and number 2. Up is on, down is off. For the settings, you have 1 up, 0 down is balanced, both up is bass, and then 1 down, 2 up is warm, and then both down is treble. To put them in your ears and just let them sit, they are extremely comfortable. I don't have any problems with the fit, and the overall isolation is probably about 66% of outside noises is blocked. These do a pretty good job of blocking outside noises. So if you want to use them in an office, walking around the neighborhood or your house, they should do an adequate job. Probably won't be the best for mass transit and louder environments. Overall, the design, the look, the fit, the feel of them is very good. No complaints. All right, so the Hidizs MD4. How would I describe it? Temperamental, finicky, and picky. Why I say that? Well, I mentioned the tips earlier. I wasn't able to use any of the tips. They all had one thing in common: elevated treble and elevated upper mids and harshness. And it just was fatiguing for my ears. I just could not use any of the stock tips, no matter what the filter I used it on. They all were painful. And so I had to search out a tip that worked for me on all of the different filters. And so first of all, we went with JVC spiral dots. So that is the tip that was used to do this review. I had to change the tips. I could not use the stock tips. They just were not good for me. Might work for you, but for me, they just did not work. Okay. Gear that I used. They are nearly unlistenable on desktop gear for me. I could not handle it on the Mytek Liberty Deck 2 or on any of the amplifiers, the Headamp GSX Mini and the Drop 1 Linear, the Aueze Deckard, the SMSL DO 100 HO 100 stack, or the Aune X1S GT. It just did not sound good whatsoever. I could not get a desktop setup to sound good and to be tolerable for my ears. Going to DAPs. DAPs were adequate. They weren't my favorite, but they were tolerable. I found that the Sony WM1A was the Sony NWA105 was I could listen to them, but I just didn't really enjoy them. The Hidizs AP80 Pro was okay. I was all right with it. It didn't really impress me, but I could listen to it. Where I really found that I could listen and enjoy it was dongles. I only listened on dongles after I figured that out. Dongles became my preference, and I have two that were my main preference: the Hibi FC4 and the Hibi FC3. The others that I could use that were okay and acceptable were the X-Duo Link 2 V2, that's the 3.5 version, and then the NextDrive Spectra X, and also the Periodic Audio Rhodium. I found that those three, the last three, were okay. They weren't anything special, but I could at least listen for a while. But the two Hibis were the ones that impressed me the most and were the most favorites of mine. And I enjoyed the sound of them. So, all sound impressions will be based using the Hibi FC3 and FC4, JVC spiral dots, and the stock cable, and tuning filters. So the tuning filters with the stock tips were just, no, they were a no-go, no matter the source. And I found that on balance setting, it was bloated upper bass, bloated lower mids, shrill upper mids, recessed main mids, excessively hot treble, and harsh resolution. They just weren't very good whatsoever. The bass filter, you end up with less bass, a little bit recessed main mids, tolerable upper mids, and tolerable treble, but still had harsh resolution. And then I found that on the warm setting, you had a pleasant bass, but it wasn't really well defined. Warm lower and main mids, which was nice. It kind of brought the main mids up a little bit, but it made the upper mids super excessively shouty and very aggressive. And then the treble was somewhat tame, and it had that harsh resolution. Then on the treble setting was kind of anemic on bass. It really wasn't very much there whatsoever. Sounded all right, but I really wanted some more. And then had somewhat warmish lower and main mids, and the upper mids were shouty, but not as much as they were on the warm setting. And then it was extremely hot treble, way too elevated, and harsh resolution. And so they were just uber finicky on everything with the stock. I just couldn't listen to them. So popped onto JVC spiral dots and turned it back to the balanced setting and also the bass setting. So bass. The bass is good. It's not the best. It is rolled off in the sub bass, so you're not going to get a whole lot of sub bass rumble and grumble. You will get mostly mid bass and upper bass presence. In fact, you get a little too much upper bass presence, no matter if you're using the balanced or the bass filter. And I found that balanced was actually a little bit more full and a little bit more thicker, and also went into a little bit more of one note mode in the main bass and upper bass regions. The bass setting was nice in that it was a little more controlled and a little bit more defined, but they're fairly close. I kind of lean towards the bass setting in that regard, but because of some other issues with the bass filter, I ended up using the balance filter the most. Found that the JV spiral dots did lessen that area a little bit and helped out the balanced filter, which is why I used that. I did not have near as much bloat in the main mids and lower or main bass and upper bass regions with the JVC spiral dot. Going into the mids with both filters, either the bass or the balanced, the lower mids is nice and full. You get a little bit of richness to it. It is getting bleed from the upper bass region. It is a little too far extended in, but overall it just adds a little bit of body to things. Main mids are a slight step back, but they're not hollow or sound like you're in a cave. They're just a little bit farther back and not as presented as much. And then the upper mids definitely are elevated. They are pushed forward. You're going to get a little bit more aggressive vocal presence, and it does cause some instruments to sound somewhat uneven balance, like pianos and guitars and some woodwinds really were a little uneven at times, but it wasn't like super annoying and stand out a whole lot, except for me in stock setting with the stock tips. Then it became very noticeable, but with the JVC spiral dots, it was more leaning to balanced than it was in stock form. The upper mids do have a little bit of aggression to them. They are just a little bit on the leaning to shouty side, but with the change in tips, it does become more tolerable. And then the lower treble is elevated as well, and there is a little bit of a peak. And if you're sensitive to that area, it can become a little fatiguing. I found, again, with the JVC spiral dots and using the balanced filter that was tamed just a little bit. But it can still have its moments of a little bit too much sparkle and energy. And then the treble has good energy throughout, nice airy approach to things. Depending on the filters that you use, that can be very aggressive. But I found that with the JVC spiral dots, it was well controlled and had good detail and retrieval. And that harshness from the lower mids and the lower, from the upper mids and the lower treble region was better controlled. Soundstage is fairly wide, does a good job giving you a space and has nice separation and isolation of instruments. Not the best, but it does a good enough job. Imaging is nice. Things track across the stage and you can place things. It's not the most precise, but it's in this neighborhood. It's in this neighborhood. And depth-wise is okay. It's not the greatest and most deep of stages. Layering is all right, but it does kind of become confused on busier tracks, complex tracks, a little bit more bassy tracks. And that really was accentuated with the stock tip. With the JVC tips, you did get a little bit more air and a little bit more space, and you had a little bit more clarity. And so that helped. And also depending on which filter you use, that can be very much affected. So overall, I find that the tone and timbre of the Hidizs MD4 is acceptable. It's not the most natural sounding. It does have a little bit of BA timbre. It is a little bit on the metallic side, especially in the uppers where it is a little bit more elevated. But I find for the most part, it's acceptable. It's not annoying. It's not like, ew, this is disgusting. But it's also not the most natural and accurate sound. It does have that balance, that BA timbre to it. Detail retrieval and resolution is good. It's not the greatest, but at the same time, it's an alrightly detailed sound. Resolution can be a problem, especially if you listen at higher listening volumes. It'll be a little bit harsh. And it can at times become a little too shimmery, a little too glary, and a little too aggressive. But for the most part, it's a good, detailed, resolving IEM. Very temperamental, very finicky, and very picky. And I don't mind the MD4. In fact, I like it. But then at other times, I'm finding it to be really annoying. And I really honestly don't understand the MD4. It is such a mixed bag of enjoyment and just kind of annoyance. I don't know if you've ever, when you were a teenager or any time in your lifetime, did one of those relay races where you were on a team and you ran to the end of the line and there was somebody standing there with a bag of food and you just had to reach in blindly and grab out a product, eat it in full, whether it be a can of soda or a rice cake or something in between. You had to eat it completely and then run back, and your whole team had to do it, and whichever team finished first won. The MD4s are kind of like that. It's a mixed bag. You don't know what you're going to get until you try it and until you reach in there and you listen to the song. And I like, but I don't like, and I want to recommend, but at the same time, I have to caution. The MD4 is temperamental, finicky, and picky. How's it compared to a couple other IEMs in its similar price points? The Audio Ume, you're going to get a lot better tonal balance. You're going to have a lot better tone and timbre. You're going to have a lot more accuracy. It's going to be more natural sounding. Detail retrieval is about the same. Resolution slightly better on the Ume. And then soundstage wise, a little bit bigger on the MD4. But the overall depth and layering is slightly better on the Ume. Going to the Massdrop Kato, the Massdrop Kato is more balanced and cohesive, has more natural and accurate sounding tone and timbre, does a little bit better with detail retrieval and is better resolving, and has a more accurate and true soundstage with width, depth, and layering. So overall, the Hidizs MD4, if you want to play around and try every single tip in your desk and try every single source, change cables, fiddle around with filters, and find that proper source and those songs that just make the Hidizs MD4 sing, then I recommend them. If tweaking things and fiddling around with filters, tips, cables, and all that kind of stuff annoys you, MD4 might not be for you. This has been Dave, the Honest Audiophile. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. Speaking of next videos, somewhere on the screen, subscription links and notification bells. If you haven't already, please check those off. And then don't forget to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the video. There's all kinds of things listed down below for gear tier lists, music recommendations, and all kinds of other things. So check out those links. And don't forget that honesty is the best policy and that you need to enjoy the music.